Here we go. So probably got a thing that says it is recording. All right, so we'll kick off, and I am very privileged and happy to welcome you all. Sort of the first class or seminar or session we've done like this. A little bit scary, a little bit exciting. In particular, I'd love to welcome Adele Martin. Adele specialises as a money coach and runs masterclasses to help clients in their 20s, 30s and 40s to empower themselves and to have a better relationship with money. So she's multi-award winning, highly recognised, so we're very privileged to have Adele here tonight. And without any much further ado, I'm going to hand over to her to invite her to kick off the session.
Great, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I know it would have been a lot easier to sit and watch Netflix. So the fact that you guys are here tonight, I want to make sure you can get absolutely everything out of the session, our next 45 minutes or so together. As wouldn't be a financial planning disclaimer without having a disclaimer. So this is just general information, not personal advice. But to get the most out of this presentation, as I said, it would have been a lot easier for you guys to be, sitting back, scrolling through Netflix. You've invested in your time tonight. I want to make sure you get the most out of it. And to do that, I'm going to ask you to do two things. Firstly is to participate. If I ask a question, I want you guys to engage and respond. I think we're all familiar with Zoom now. We know how to enter the chat. And then I'm also, if you haven't already, get some notes in front of you. There's going to be some stuff, a little exercise I'm going to get you to do. So if you haven't already, get some notes in front of you. That would be really helpful as well. So let's test this. Can I get a yes in the comments or a hell yes in the comments for if you're committed to doing those two things tonight? Yes, 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 yes. Awesome. Okay. So what I want for you guys more than anything is independence. And for me, independence means that I have money, which is going to give me more choices and control. So for me, independence comes from having those three things. And for me, independence means it lets me spend more time with my family. So that's why independence is important to me, because I can, have, flexibility around how much I work, where I work. And so that's, and I know, Leon, I saw you with a little one there as well. So yeah, I know that, for me, that's why having, mastering my money and having control of my money is really important. It lets me have that independence. But I'm curious to hear from you guys, just in the chat, if you want to put it in the chat, why is independence important to you? It's important for different reasons to different people. For some people, it's around having control over their job and their choice of job, control over how much they work, where they live, the types of holidays, being able to support charities, being able to support elderly family. There's lots of reasons why people want to have independence. And I'm curious to hear from you guys why you want independence. 5 kids, Jesus. We are 2 and done, not 5. So yeah, obviously kids is a reason. Family security, opportunities. That's right, those choices, those opportunities. Of retirement, yeah, one day to have the choice about whether you retire. Being able to move out of home and buy a house. So, having your own independence around where you live, and building your business. To provide kids with holidays and memories. Memories, yeah, exactly. Excellent. So everyone wants this, wants independence for different reasons. Now, to get to that financial independence, I know that we need to really, if we don't have that financial independence, then what tends to happen is we tend to get a bit stuck. But to have that financial independence, we need, 3 things. We need to have really good structure with our money. So we need to have, a good money plan. But we also need to, once we know how much we're saving, we need to have a good strategy, what we actually going to do with this money. And we need to also master our psychology as well. If we don't do those 3 things, we don't have good structure on our money, a good strategy, and we haven't mastered our psychology around our money, then our wealth isn't going to grow as quickly as we like. We might feel a bit stuck, like we're treading water and not getting anywhere. Or we could feel like we're not achieving as much as we could. We don't feel as successful as we could be because we haven't mastered those things. So I don't know if anyone else is resonating with that, sometimes feeling a bit stuck, not happy with how you not feeling like you're achieving all that you could. And that's what happens if we're not mastering our money. What I want to do tonight is I want to really to get to these things, to get to this independence, you're going to need 9 things. So I'm going to go high level. I just went high level. I'm going to zoom down. To have good structure around your money, you need to have a budget. Now, I actually hate the word budget because a budget feels like a straitjacket. But I'm going to show you some strategies that you can use to make having a budget, super easy and actually, fun. I'm going to talk to you about, we're going to talk about benchmarking and why benchmarking is important when you're trying to have some structure around your money. We're also going to talk about tonight your banking structure and how you can use your banking structure to make it easier to save as well. Now, to have good strategy, so to have structure, you need those 3 things. You need to have a realistic budget, a realistic spending plan. You need to make sure you have some benchmarks in place. And we're going to talk about the importance of tracking and why we do that. But also we're going to look at, how you can use your bank accounts to make it easier for you to save. The other thing that we need to have that independence is we need to have strategy with our money. So we can have strategy around how we use debt. I know this is Martin's, specialty area. How we use debt. There is actually you can be smarter with debt. So there's better ways you can use debt. So you can use debt to invest, not just in property, but also in shares. HEX debt is one of the more friendlier debts you can have because it only goes up by inflation. And I think that sort of debt, your HEX and HELP debt, HEX is probably showing my age, but your HELP debt is a great debt because it invests in your brain. And for me, that's an asset. So yeah, there is different ways you can have debt. And often I see people have got their debt structured wrong, where they're paying off the wrong debt. They didn't realize that their investment property should be interest only, and they've been paying down the wrong debt. And now they've messed up the tax deductibility of it. So when you are building wealth, it's important to make sure you've got a strategy for your debt as well. We've also, when you've got a strategy for building wealth, there's 2 things that we need to look at. We need to look at your assets and also ownership. Sometimes people can confuse the 2, but an asset is an investment, shares, property, business, cash, and an ownership is who should own that. The tax structure, whether that's in your name or in joint names or an investment bond or a super, the 2 are very different. So yeah, and the ownership of it could actually, and the tax that you're paying could greatly impact the return that you get. So when we're talking about strategy, it's really important that we not just look at the investment. Yes, we should look at shares, property, cash, but we also should look at who should actually own it, because that can have a big impact, not just on tax, but estate planning, risk especially if you're in business or have an occupation where you might be sued. So ownership is a really important strategy to look at when you are building wealth as well. And then the other thing that's really important to look at is psychology around, building wealth as well. And when I'm talking about psychology, I'm talking about not just, having goals is definitely one of them. So we spend a lot of time looking at what is our goals, because I hear people say, weekly, sometimes almost daily, I used to be able to save when I, had a wedding or when I was saving to go overseas. But now I'm in my house and I've saved the deposit. I just don't seem to have any motivation. I can't seem to save anymore. But I used to earn less and save more. And so we're going to talk tonight and show some examples of why having goals is really important, especially smaller short-term goals as well as some long-term ones as well. So we're going to share some stories, some amazing results that clients have been able to achieve by having some goals and something to focus on. The other thing that's really important in psychology is this motivation. How do you keep motivated? When you set up something like this, how do you keep motivated? That's really important for financial independence. As well as something that I commonly see is people have some beliefs around money that are probably built from childhood that might be sticking around and really hampering their ability to get independence. So those beliefs could be I have to work hard for money, or that a common one is subconsciously people might think this, people with money are evil or bad. And that's because we've been exposed to things like The Simpsons with Mr. Burns, and we've been told from a very young age that money is bad. And that belief actually shows up, and we might be holding ourselves back from building wealth because we've got these stories or hang-ups left over from our childhood around money. And so it's really important to understand what your beliefs around money are, because they could be holding you back. So yes, these 9 things all work together towards that financial independence. And if you master those 9 things, you get on that path to financial independence a lot quicker. They all sort of work together. So I'd love to know so far, how do you think you're going in each of these areas? If you had to give yourself an overall color, what would you say, red, green, or orange? Have you guys been able to see my screen the whole time? I wasn't sure. I just had a warning to come up. Yep, beautiful. That's good. Orange. How would you rate yourself? If you had to give yourself budget, benchmarking, banking, how would you rate yourself in all of those? Overall, those 9, if you had to give yourself a color, are you red, I'm in some trouble, orange, I'm okay, green, I'm totally mastering all those 9 areas? How would you think you're going? Orange, orange. Orange, greenish, nice, Samantha. And I'd love to know from listening to that, what 3 changes do you know you already need to make? Just in the comments, having listened to that, what are the 3 changes? Looking at these 9 areas, having some structure around your money, having a strategy to build wealth, having that right psychology. Which changes of those 9 are you leaning towards? Of which 3 do you think you already need to make? Set a clear goal, having a strategy, choices, goals, budgeting, strategy, better budgeting. Perfect. Now, in the time together, obviously I can't cover all 9 in details because we only have 45 minutes. In my program, My Money Buddy, where we help people speed up their savings and invest, in that program, we cover all 9 in detail. Today, I'm going to give you the 3 that I think is going to have the biggest impact on you, and I think you're going to get the results quickest. And that is setting a budget, having some goals, and really mastering that ownership as well. So we're going to dive into those now. I'm a big fan of showing real examples of how this has been applied and results that clients have been able to achieve. All the case studies I'm sharing, the clients are more than happy for me to share the results. I've got their full permission, just letting you guys know that. But I find that's the best way to learn, is to actually see this in action. So let's dive in. So yes, with structure, you're needing these 3 things. I want to show you the impact that mastering this has had. So this is simply by using bank accounts. So I want to show you these 3 things in action. So this was Alicia and Patrick. Now, when Alicia and Patrick first came to see me, Alicia was pregnant with her 2nd baby. And I don't know about you, but when they had that 2nd baby, they didn't, now she was working part-time. She was about to go on maternity leave. She was working part-time from the 1st baby. They had daycare fees now. They were about to have less income than ever before. They bought a new car, so now they had more debts. And she was in a job that she didn't love. And so she felt really stuck. And she felt really stressed. She was pregnant and stressing about having to go back to work really quickly because they had built up these debts and how they're going to pay for everything. So this was Alicia and Pat, and I remember the meeting very well. It was one of those meetings where, we needed a box of tissues. It was, pretty stressful, first time we met. One of the things that we did with these guys, which had the biggest impact, was really looked at their banking system. So this helped to bring their spending plan or their budget to life, is we looked at their banking system. So when we look at how we're going to a banking system, there's 3 rules that we use. I like to separate it into fun money, longer term goals, and bills, the stuff that you can't control. So I like to separate bank accounts like that. So that's the rule that we use, and then we start to apply it to their situation. Everyone's situation is different, and what works for one may not work for the other. So we're going to find, what works for everyone's different. But this is what I call my hub strategy. And so we had a hub bank account. That was the bank account that captured all their income. Now, that bank account, these could be offset accounts as well, depending on your loan structure. These could be offset accounts, but it could be tax refunds, overtime, tax return, salary. All of this goes into this account. From there, we then pay the bills. And so the stuff that you have very little control over, your bills, comes from this account. And then each week or fortnight, depending on how you like to work, I like to work on weeks, but each week this money would automatically from the hub go into their fund accounts. So I'm a big fan of each person having their own independence around money and having their play money, so they don't have to ask each other for things. If someone wants to have a betting account, they can. So having their own, if someone wants to buy their lunch every day individually, they can. So this account, having their own separate fund money, I think is really important. And then we'd have a joint entertainment account for stuff that they do together as a family or as a couple. In this case, as a family, might be going to the movies or something like bowling or something. That's the stuff they do together. And then sometimes we also have a separate account for looking good. The stuff that's a bit more lumpy that they do. Maybe they get their hair done, every 6 weeks. Maybe they do, clothes shopping every time there's a season change, once a quarter, every second month. But this is an account that's where they're looking good. I like to say that some of my clients, that's a looking great account. They have quite a bit of money going to looking good. And if this isn't a huge part of their spending, we wouldn't have it separate, but I often like to have it because it is something that's a bit lumpy. And then we have longer term goals, could be holidays, renovations, or it could be an amount that they're paying off debt. All comes from this hub. So I'll just pause it there because I know it's a lot to take in. The reason why this works is a couple of reasons. One, it makes you conscious of what you're spending. You are thinking about what goes into your entertainment account. Have I got enough? If I'm going to have a big Friday night, have I got enough to go out on a Saturday? You're looking and you're conscious about that entertainment account. So I'm really a big fan of conscious spending. I also like it because, when we did this many years ago with my husband, it used to irritate me before this that he would buy his lunch every day at work. It used to really irritate me. And so what we did when we introduced this was all of a sudden I didn't have to nag him, but he made the decision that he would once a week go to the shops, buy stuff for the week for work, rather than spending 20, 30 bucks a day on lunch. I didn't have to tell him, but when he had a certain amount of money, he made that choice himself. So he could have more money on the, Friday night drinks with the boys than spending it every day on lunch. So it just helps you prioritize what's really important to you, but it makes you conscious of what you're spending as well. I also really like this too because I can spend, say, my looking good money without feeling guilty because I know all my bills are taken care of and I know my longer term goals are taken care of as well. So it lets, and this is something that particularly I think women have, mums, is guilt-free spending. So it makes you conscious of what you're spending. It lets you have guilt-free spending and it happens on autopilot. You don't have to think about it. This strategy has worked really, really well. I'll just pause there because often we have some questions. So feel free if you've got questions to type them in the chat. But a common question I often get are these all bank accounts that looks full on? Yes, they are all bank accounts. They don't all have to have FPOS cards linked to them though. They can just be online accounts. So you don't have to worry about having heaps of cards in your wallet. Or I do have a couple of cards and just write on them what they're for and I just get each one out. So that's one question I get. The second question I get is, don't you have to pay heaps of bank fees on something like this? You can get some accounts that are, some of the packages let you have multiple accounts without having to pay multiple fees. And the other thing I encourage people to do if you are paying bank fees is to ask your bank if it's necessary. Just by asking, most of the times we can get bank fees and things waived. But I also think that for me, these fees for accounts like this, the benefit of it far outweighs the fees in a large majority of instances. But most people are on some sort of package where they get these accounts anyway. And most of the time, these can be offset accounts. Depending on the loan, they can be offset accounts. And an offset account means that, let's just say your home loan was half 500,000 and you had 100,000 sitting in an offset account. An offset account is just a savings account. You can have an FPOS card linked to it. It's just a bank account. But that 100,000 reduces your loan balance. So you only end up paying interest on the difference between the two. So if you had $500,000 loan, 100,000 offset account, you only pay interest on the 400,000. So yeah, there's some common questions that I get, but I'll just pause there to see if there's any other questions.
There's one there, Adele. If I can make a quick comment, is when I
Yeah.
see this type of hub strategy, lots of accounts, I almost always find success. It's a client who's taking control, making choices, and set goals. So it's really exciting. There's one there that came through me from Roxanne.
Yeah, great.
What about big unexpected expenses like dental
Yeah,
work?
great. That's a very great question. So I like to have an emergency fund. I personally keep my emergency funds in my hub account because I don't touch my hub account for anything but bills. It is really important to have an emergency fund built up. We all know that circumstances could change. You could get a big unexpected dental bill. COVID could hit. You could have a drop in your income or no income. So it is super important to have those emergency funds built up, and they could be sitting in your hub. For some people, that's way too tempting, and they like to have a separate account, and it's called emergency fund. That's separate. Some people have it in their redraw on their mortgage. Personally, I'm not a big fan of having in your redraw on your mortgage, and that's because a couple of times now, and I've been in the industry for 20 years this year, every time there's some sort of crisis, the banks can restrict your access to the redraw. It's in the terms of the loan of the loan contract and we saw ME Bank did it during the recent coronavirus crisis. They restricted someone. They thought they had 100 grand to pay the tax office and wages and stuff, and the bank restricted it. So I'm not a big fan of redraw. I'd rather have the control than the bank, but it depends on the sort of loan that you've got as well. So hopefully that's answered some questions. Great question though about emergency funds. Mine lives in the hub, but if it's really tempting, you might want to have a separate offer account that says emergency. And maybe one of your goals is to build up an emergency fund. So instead of having a renovation account, maybe you've got an emergency fund account. Yeah, great questions. Now, what difference did this make for these guys? Well, I need to get an updated picture because their kids are all much older now and all at school. But within the space of a couple of years, they were able to pay off all of their debts. I think it was a bit over 12 months, pay off all their debts, including all the other personal loans, like the home loan. But what happened was they also moved house, now have a house with a pool. But what I'm sort of most excited about with this was that Alicia got to quit her full-time corporate gig, which she hated. And, you know, there was a sort of place that wasn't very friendly about her wanting to work part-time or anything like that. She wanted to be able to spend time with the kids, but she still wanted to be able to you know, bring some income in as well. So she started a business called the Bliss Cartel. It does amazing, you know, bath products, and she has done, and she's got some really funny, she's got some, just some really cool makeup wipes and stuff, but that are really funny. She's very cheeky. So she has this really cool business that's now replaced her corporate income. It has this year more than replaced her corporate income. So, and she's been able to do it from home. The kids now get involved in help. And that all came from that meeting, you know, which was pregnant with a second baby to now having her own business in a new house with a pool, you know, and her husband, Pat's been able to now, you know, have more flexibility in his work as well. So yeah, that came from mastering those bank account structures. So I'd love from you guys, if you don't currently have a budget or a spending plan in place, how much do you think is currently slipping through your hands each week? Do you think it could be 20 bucks a week, 50 bucks a week, 100 bucks a week? How much do you think just goes somewhere and you're not really sure where it goes? I'd love to know in the comments, how much do you think that is? 50 to 100, 150. So let's just do a little exercise. I want you to get your number. You might need a calculator for you to do this. I want you to get what your number is, whatever your number is. I then want you to get a calculator, and I want you to times it by 52 because there's 52 weeks of the year. So if it was $100 a week, then that's $5,200 a year. It's going somewhere that you're not really sure because you don't have a plan for your money. And then I want you to times it by 10. That's how much over 10 years this amounts to. Now, I'd love it in the comments. Whatever your number is, I'd love it you to put in the comments. How much is your number? Is it 50, 100 plus thousand? And if you had 78,000, if you had that money right now, what would you do with it? 104,000 between us, buy a house. $52,000. And if you had that money now, what would you do with it? Gym membership you don't use, take the kids around Australia, buy a house, pay off the mortgage. Awesome. I'm loving the interaction, guys. Thank you. So we've really seen the power of having some structure around the money. We really looked at, mastering that banking and budgeting structure. I now want to look at another way we can work towards that financial independence, and that is the ownership. So the assets that we build, it's really important, whether it's shares or property or your own business, it's really important we look at who owns it. So yeah, let's dive into that. Before I do that, I want to share with you a really sad story. It's sadder than The Notebook. I don't know if any of you have seen The Notebook, but it's sadder than The Notebook, this short story I'm about to share. And it's a real story. This was going back years ago now. I used to work with retirees. So I used to work with people who had retired or were about to retire. And John and Mary were one of these clients who came into the office. I remember it was an afternoon meeting, and John and Mary came in. John was 63 and Mary was about 60 from memory. Yep. And they were in my office. I had to chat to them beforehand, so I know a little bit about them already because I had to chat to them on the phone. I know they had about 400,000 in their super, and they owned their own house. Now they walked into the office and sat down, and John says to me, "My back is absolutely stuffed. I don't think I can do another winter. I can't do another winter. I want to know, have I got enough to be able to retire?" And I had to tell John that he was going to run out of money in their 70s, and they would have to live off the age pension. Does anyone know how much the age pension is each week? Does anyone know how much the age pension is? We want to have a guess? 35K, yeah. Yeah, it's about that $650 a week, depending on if you're a couple or not. But I don't know about you, but thinking about what my food bill is each week, and these guys, if they wanted to keep their private health insurance, which they've paid for forever, that being on the age pension was just not going to cut it. And John said to me, which I would, hear many times in many client meetings, "I wish I saw you years ago. Why didn't we see you years ago?" And I could hear the regret in their voices, because these guys had, a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice, with now very little to show for it. And it broke my heart because I couldn't change their circumstances. And unfortunately, these guys were not the only ones. I would hear over and over again, "I wish we saw you years ago." And that's why I made the decision, I think coming up to 8 years this year, that I would only work with people well before retirement, in their 20s, 30s and 40s. So I still had time to make a difference. And one of the things that we are now doing is really paying attention to building up assets. We want to get our assets built up and working for us, so that one day we don't have to work. So when we're looking at building up assets and building up wealth, we're looking at who should own it. Now, I'm just going to talk to you about the common ways that people can own it, and that is they can own it in your own name. You can own it in something called an investment bond, which we'll cover off. You can also own it in your super fund as well, which we'll talk about as well. So if you owned it in your own name, an investment in your own name, then any income that it produces, or rent if it's a property, gets taxed somewhere between 0 and 47%, depending on how much you earn. So depending on we've got a tax system in Australia, the more you earn, the more tax you pay. And if you sold that asset and made a gain, provided you've held it for more than a year, you only get taxed on half of that. So the gain system, 50% discount you're having in your own name is not a bad, system for assets that have capital growth on them. So you could have it in your own name, but income produced, you get hammered pretty hard, and you get taxed on half the gain if you've held it for more than 12 months. So the second way you can hold it is through an investment bond. Now, an investment bond is taxed at 30%. So it lodges a tax return just like you. And when it lodges a tax return, it gets taxed at 30%, but it doesn't get any discount, any capital gain. So there's no discount in capital gains. Investment bonds can be a strategy that people often use for kids. So I've got my son's education set up in an investment bond. Poor Rose, she's 6 months and I haven't had time to do hers yet, but I will do yours, Rose, I promise. So I've got my son Eddie set up, and we're regularly adding to that. And for me, it's simple. It doesn't have to go into my tax return. I don't have to think about it. But also I really like the investment bond because I'm hoping that he's around enough money stuff from me that by the time he gets the money, I chose 25, he actually wants to keep it. Or maybe he wants to buy a house with it, but I would love it to be something that he just keeps adding to. And it can continue on. It doesn't have to have a tax event. So I'm hoping at 25, he just takes over and keeps adding to it. And that just be something that he has, forever. I'm a big fan of putting 10% of your income away from the first income that you get and investing that. So I'm hoping he gets a job at 16, 17, starts putting that 10% away, and he can add to it as well. So yeah, that I'm a massive fan of investment bond for simplicity more than anything. But it doesn't have to hit my tax return. It can go straight to him. It doesn't have to be a CGT event when it goes to him, but you don't get that discount in any capital gains tax. After 10 years in those investment bonds, it's tax paid. You don't have to pay any more tax, which is good. But any tax is taxed by the fund at 30%. So investment bond is one investment structure you can use to build wealth. Although one of the probably one of the ones with the most money in it that we can tax structure is our superannuation. So I want you to, but superannuation isn't a super fun topic. It's 1,000 years away before you can touch it, or sooner for some of us. But I want you to pretend that super is actually like some sort of tropical island, some sort of tax haven. And this tax haven, this country, only charges 15% income tax. And in fact, in retirement, you can have a large chunk of assets and pay zero tax. Before you retire, if you did sell any assets, you'd only have to pay capital gains tax on a third of it, so at 10%. 10% capital gains tax, 15% income tax, and in retirement, the large bulk tax free. How amazing would a country be that only had 15% tax? Everyone would be flocking to that country. So think of superannuation like that, like a country that's like a tax haven. Of course, the drawback is you can't touch it until you retire, which for some people is actually a good thing because it means that they can't spend it, but that is the downside of it. And of course, the government is constantly changing, the rules with it as well. That's the other downside. When I first started in financial planning, you could put as much as you liked into superannuation. There was no limit on what you could have in it, what you could put in each year. But they had limits on what you could get out. And now they've sort of reversed that. There's limits on how much you can put in each year, how much tax you can take advantage of. So it is definitely an area that, is always, the government likes to change the rules on. But it is a very tax effective way to, build wealth. And I'd love it, given that it's probably going to be one of your biggest assets. I think there's only 3 trillion or 3 trillion in the super system. I'd love to see to test your super IQ. So just keep a tally of how many yeses and nos you've got. Do you have a rough idea how much is in your superannuation? Yes or no? Do you know what your super fund is currently charging you? What fees are being taken out? Yes or no? Have you compared your super fund to at least 2 other funds? Yes or no? Do you know your super fund's investment performance over the last 1, 5, 10 years? Do you know how it's performed? What sort of percentage return it's given you? Yes or no? Do you know how much the insurance premium is deducted from your super fund each year? Yes or no? I'll just leave those there for a second. How many yeses, how many nos? And we've got one more page. Do you know how much superannuation you will have at age 60? Yes or no? Do you know what superannuation contributions can be? Do you know that super contributions can be split to your spouse's super each year? So let's just pick on the example where one partner is working full-time and they're putting in contributions, their employer's putting in contributions, the partner's working part-time or having time out of workforce with kids, their super's not growing or might even be going backwards. The contributions that the employer is putting into and the salary sacrifice that the husband's putting in, or even the employer contributions, could be split to the other partner. So you can balance out the supers and one person's super doesn't have to get, eaten up with fees and insurances and stuff if they're not working. So did you know that you can split your spouse contributions to super in super? Did you know that you can claim a tax deduction for superannuation contributions? So did you know that? And there's limits on how much you can claim, but did you know that? Did you know that what tax is payable in your super at retirement? And number 10, do you know what tax is payable on death? So I'll just put a second there. How many yeses, how many no's? We'll go through those one more time. How many yeses? How many yeses, how many no's? I'd love to know how many, did anyone get 10 yeses? 4 yeses, thank you. 9 no's, so we're seeing a lot of no's. 2, yikes, that's all right, plenty of opportunity to be able to improve. And I think for me, this is worth paying attention to. As I said, it's one of your biggest assets. Often it's something we've just handed to our employer to be able to do. But I often say to people, would you give your employer, 100, 200 grand to go buy your house and never look at it? And you wouldn't often give that sort of responsibility to your employer without ever checking on them. Yet we do it as one of our biggest assets. And one of our most tax effective ways to build wealth as well. So yes, we've spoken about ownership and the importance of ownership, because that can greatly impact the returns that you get. If you had exactly the same assets invested exactly the same, one pays 40% tax and one pays 15, invested the same, the one that pays less tax is going to return a lot better. So just pause there. Any questions? I mean, just conscious of time, we'll just keep rolling on. The last thing I want to talk about is the importance of having goals. I want to show you the power of having goals and why this is important. Why having goals, gives us something to focus on, and why it's really important. But I don't know about you. I don't know if you've ever, set goals before, but I often used to set them at New Year's, and I'd be, super excited setting new goals, whether that's to lose weight, get fit, whatever your new goal was. New Year's Eve, you're super excited. But then, New Year's Day rocks around and you're, got a bit of maybe a champagne headache, or maybe that's just me, a champagne headache. And now you're slightly less enthused. And then, February, can't be back at work, and all before you know it, you're halfway through February, and that goal has become a distant memory. I don't know if anyone else can relate to that. Certainly that was me. Good news, if you can relate to that, it's only 9% of people actually ever achieve their New Year's goals when they set New Year's resolutions. So it's, that was done by one of the American universities to discover that. But good news is it's not your fault. I've worked with hundreds of people now setting and achieving their goals, and I know it's not your fault. The problem is we set goals based on what other people's version of success is, or what we think should be important, without actually assessing it against what's important to us. So I'm going to show you this in action. So this is Brody and Ebony. Brody and Ebony, when they first came to saw me, were earning pretty good money. Brody had just taken a job a few months ago doing FIFO work. And he thought that doing the FIFO work, fly in, fly out work, was going to solve all his money, their money problems. That they would be able to then save if they earned more money. And I said, what I said to a lot of people is, it doesn't. What you earn is actually the wealth that you have is not a correlation to what you earn. The more you earn does not equate to more money. And that's sometimes a hard concept for people to get their head around. But if you don't have the principles mastered when you're earning, 100,000, you're not suddenly going to have the principles mastered when you're earning 500, 600 plus thousand. So it's the same principles apply regardless of the income that you're earning. So he thought that they'd do the FIFO work, and FIFO work, I don't know if some of you guys do that. It's hard work. You're away from your family. You miss lots of stuff. You can work for weeks at a time, 12 plus hour days and have no breaks. And then you miss out on a lot of stuff. But he was doing that sacrifice because he thought it would help him save, and it didn't. And when he came to me, he was really confused because he said, I wasn't sure what I'm doing wrong because I'm earning more money than ever before and I can't seem to save. And I said to him, it doesn't matter what you earn, it's what you keep that really matters. And so the first thing we did with these guys was we found out what was really important to them. That was we really drilled in, and we did that by getting them to do a wish list of all the things they'd love to be able to do if money wasn't an issue. We did an exercise where we uncovered and unlocked what their values were, and what was important to them. And then we overlaid the two. So we said, well, of these goals, what values do they represent? And we did a goals board where we figured out which goals were actually really important to them. So in action, this is their wish list that they did. They wanted to do jet skis, have new cars, have a new house. They want to do a wedding, safari, start a family, eventually buy a farm. And they wanted to be able to retire by age 60 or before. And I really encourage them to put as much detail into these goals as possible, when and dollar figures. Just by sharing the goals, statistically speaking, you are much more likely to achieve them just by sharing them, by writing them and sharing them. You're more likely to achieve them. So that a big part of this is getting them to really flesh it out, put dollar values on things and timeframes and stuff. So it was one of the first things that we did. The second, you see, that's a pretty good list that they've got, and they've been really struggling to save. So yeah, this was their first thing. The second thing we did was we uncovered what their values are. Now, values are different to goals because values are what sits behind your goals. They are your reason for doing something. So I've got my family there. I'm one of 6 kids, so 5 girls and 1 baby brother. And I'll pick on my sister, Cherie. Cherie's my tall sister. My sister, Cherie, and I, we both love holidays and we both have goals of holidays. But the reason why we do holidays is very different. She would have a all-inclusive Fijian holiday that has all the kids packages and can sit by the pool, where my holidays tended to be ones that I could tie into learning something. So I did the Great Wall of China, and if I can go to a conference in America and tie in a holiday that has a conference attached to it. So because I really value learning, she really values family and time together and rest and stuff, and relaxation was really important. So we've got the same goal, but our reasons are very different. So we did this exercise with Brody and Ebony, and we discovered that what really important to them was family, security, independence, adventure, and friendship. They were the 5 that really stood out to them. And then once we did that values exercise, we then tied it together on their goals board. So these are the goals that they all said. And we said, okay, well, which ones have actually the biggest values associated with it? Well, the house, they really value security. They really value independence. They really want to be able to have their family over and start a family. And they really wanted to have a house to be able to do that. Likewise, the wedding, which was on here as well, was about their family and friends, so of their goals. So you can see that this really helped them figure out which ones were sort of most important. I then got them to do what was a must and what was a want. So they did this, really got all their goals out in their head, really helped them to prioritize. And can you guys, do you know what they, and the other thing we did was, I said, especially if people have been having trouble with saving, I say, well, let's just focus on one goal. Yes, you might have multiple goals you want to save for, a house and a wedding and stuff like that, but let's just focus on one goal first, really get some momentum going before we worry about all of the goals you want to be able to do. Let's get some momentum happening first and get focused on one. So in the comments, I'd love to know, what do you think they did? Do you think they did the house or wedding first? Wedding. So I will let you know, drum roll please. They actually bought a house first. So for them, they really realized, and this is their house, they realized that having a house, was really important to them. It was, and they became super focused, and it was easy for them to save because they had that one goal, and it was really important to both of them to work towards. Now, since then, they've actually ticked off a large majority of those other goals on their board. I just found out yesterday that they're also expecting a family now as well, which is very exciting. They did get the jet skis against my better judgment, but they have done most of those things on there, which is very exciting. And they did get married after the house as well. But it all came from having something to focus on. Now, I would love to know from you guys, what would a good 12 months look like? If you were to apply some of this stuff, what would you really love to be able to tick off and to achieve in the next 12 months to be super happy with your success? If you're looking back in 12 months' time, what would you like to have been able to achieve? Buy a house, family holiday, wedding and house, renovation, buy a house. upgrade to a bigger home. Nice. Get the mortgage down. Start investing. And what are the 3 things you could get started on in the next 6 weeks to build you closer? What's something you could 3 projects you could tick off the next 6 weeks that's going to get you closer to that goal? Do you need to do some research? Do you need to create a spending plan? Do you need to set goals, budget? Stop buying clothes. Excellent. Drink less wine. Well, if you're in lockdown, that might be hard. Excellent. I think we're at time. I've gone to 45 minutes. I'd love to now open it up to questions if people have questions. And if you guys want more tips to be able to speed up your savings and increase your investment and reduce your debt, so you can get those goals quicker, I would love it if you were to join the Savings Squad. That's my free money community where we nerd out and do all sorts of things inside the Savings Squad. So I'd love it if you could search in the Facebook group, search in Facebook, the Savings Squad. I'd love to see some of you guys in there. We do all sorts of fun things. We had an investment money challenge we did a couple of months ago. We've got some inside the unit section. We've got some budgeting tips as well. We do all sorts of, I think, cool but nerdy, muddy things in there. I would love to see some of you guys in there. But I'd love to open it up to questions and hand it back to Martin.
That's awesome. Hey, I love that, the goal setting and the prioritizing. How good was that? Would love to hear anyone has a question. There must be something on the tip of your tongue that was related to that, or got any questions I'd like to throw? Either come off mute or throw a question up on the chat box. Didn't picture it was a shy gang.
And if you do have any questions, you're welcome to just friend request me on Facebook or message me. You'll find me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But hopefully that's giving you some food for thought. Renee wants to know, Renee, shoot me through a message and I'm happy to have a chat about how we might be able to help. If some of you guys are looking to take some of these tips and you want to help apply some of the stuff from today, I'm more than happy to just friend request me on Facebook. I'm more than happy to have a chat to see how we might be able to help you apply some of these stuff.
Yeah, just if I can just give a quick thank you and summary. Thanks so much, Adele. That's awesome. You've all got your notepads or your phones there. Write down the name, Adele Martin. And as she said, she's very accessible. You look online, you'll find her easy to find. She's got the Savings Squad has a huge following. It's about 1,500 or something. So to nerd out, I love that term, go and nerd out. That's exceptional. Some of the real things that I thought were awesome, the hub accounts approach, that's been a great sign of success. And I don't want to make comparisons, but that's also Barefoot Investor sort of style too. It's a clear success indicator of taking ownership and setting a spending plan, as Adele refers to it, which I think is a fantastic term. It's not a budget, it's a spending plan. I'm making choices. I love the concept of ownership. I thought that was so good. And writing and sharing your goals. I've got nerd out circled twice. I love that. Being proactive on your money, understanding your super, and it's never too early to plan. So really excited about the concept of your focus, Adele, for supporting people in their 20s, 30s and 40s as a focus area. And just so everyone has clarity, her principal business is coaching, training, mentoring. So whether it's the group sessions in the Savings Squad or like Renee's expressed interest in a further chat about what programs, what structure, what other things might be possible on a group or individual basis, that's sort of where she goes with it. We also have within our company, many of you would be aware, we have our own in-house financial planning service, Wealth Market. So that's where we refer our insurance, risk insurance and TPD and death and coverage and protection clients, and also planning clients as well. So if you want to come back to me with more of a chat on your situation, I'll be very happy to put you in touch with someone to help you out. I probably won't go into the costs and consults and anything. I would encourage you to reach out to Adele, and I would probably think it's appropriate for me to say we've only come in touch in the last month or so. I'm not personally familiar with her program, so make your own research and due diligence and the like. I just wanted to raise the topic and show my excitement about the broad world of taking ownership of your own future financially. So fantastic. I think any last comment, Adele, from you?
No, we did have one question around the super, whether it's ability to pay off your super or put it into your mortgage, which I think for Samantha, I think that's a great question because I do get asked that a lot. So if you were to do the numbers, just purely the mathematics, for the large majority of people, it would make more sense to put money in super because most people would pay less tax that way. But also we think about interest rates on a mortgage versus what your super, earns long term as well. But this is a big but. You can't get that money back out. So I'm not a big fan of people thinking about building up superannuation unless they have a good emergency funds built up. And they've got things like, money set aside for their goals, like their house and stuff like that. Because as soon as you put it into super, you can't get it back out. So yeah, that's just something to be mindful of. I also know, particularly if anyone's listening that's self-employed, it's really easy for self-employed people not to put any money into super. Keep thinking next year. If that's you and you're self-employed, I always encourage self-employed people just to put a little bit. If you can't afford the full 10%, it's 10% now, just put a little bit away. Any little bit helps. Start with $20 a week and you can always build on it. But yeah, Samantha, I hope that answers your question. Yeah,
super is amazing as an accumulating asset. I would reinforce and highlight for anyone taking out any advice, you should seek professional advice. You should seek it thoroughly for your situation. And it's best to do it in the context of a strategy, and a statement of advice would be a thorough approach to treating this within your own situation. So, but appreciate the general concepts and tips and the coaching support. Awesome stuff. Thanks so much, Adele. And I wish everyone a good night.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers all.
Bye.